those two big traditional style stouts of last week, we're back with a couple more of the sweeter, more dessertier kind this. And first up, we take a short hop back over to the Netherlands, to the northern city of Alkmaar, famed more for its cheeses than its beer, but I think today's brewery might just put Alkmaar on the map for its beer too. As today we welcome to the channel the beer engineers, Moersleutel. Founded back in 2016, Moersleutel was founded by four brothers and a love of brewing, which was inherited from their parents that ran a brewery back in the day. But they sure have made something of a name for themselves brewing big and bold Impy stouts. And I must confess I have had one of those Impy stouts previous to this, and it was something special. So with these guys in K's brewery, the Dutch beer scene really is sneaking under the radar, especially if you're into big dessert Impy stouts. So I do have something of lofty hopes for this one here, as today we meet the Kivex, a healthy 11% Muscovado pecan pie imperial stout. In their series of sweet pastry stout monsters, they have a scary but sweet worm-like creature that goes by the name of Kivex. He loves pecan pies, especially those made with Muscovado sugar, which is of course a form of unrefined dark sugar with a strong molasses type character. So I guess that's something we should definitely be keeping an eye out for this one, as well as I'm sure some nutty and even creamy notes too, as this has been brewed with both vanilla and lactose. And like I said previously, I have actually had one of their stouts before. I've also had one of their IPAs too, and pleasantly surprised by both. So let's unleash this dessert-loving beast. Let's get pouring. So it is actually quite chocolatey on the nose. Definitely getting that vanilla and lactose quite prominently up top too, with just an ever so subtle note of burnt sugars. Guess that can only be those Muscovado sugars. Oh, and boy is it smooth. Lots of those sweet, very smooth caramel-like sugar notes. And that vanilla and lactose really is adding to the sweetness and really helping to pack out that almost marshmallowy-like body. It is a real mouthful. And even with a generous level of carbonation, it is doing nothing to lighten that load. And it fades out with those molasses and burnt sugar notes into the tail. There is a real noticeable bitterness of coffee in that finish too. Quite the carbonation. And that 11% ABV, although well hidden early on by those sweeter notes, is really starting to become a little more prominent now. There is definitely a weighty note of booze in that finish, and it is creeping up ever so slowly into those middles too. And although it definitely has that dessert, that pastry feel, pecan pie isn't exactly the first thing it's bringing to mind. Maybe it's reminding me more of something like a Mississippi mud pie. But either way, it is a real after-dinner treat. And as that booze is creeping its way up the beer, it's adding a real richness to those early sweet notes. And it's gone from being quite light and playful into something more monstrous and a little more adult. And now we're down into the final third. That early sweetness has somewhat subsided, as roasted malts and those burnt sugars are really starting to pack things out some. And that 11% ABV is really pulling its weight too, as those boozy notes are really being carried beautifully by that smooth, thick and chewy body. It just invites you to take sip after sip. And along with those roasted malts, those nutty notes are starting to be just a little more present. And although that vanilla and that lactose, there's still just a little hint of it up top, subtle sweet creamy note. Most of that sweetness has become quite dry now, which again is probably coming from that weight of ABV. But I tell you what, for a lazy afternoon or an after dinner treat, you can't go far wrong with one of these.